This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 253 of the GardenDC podcast. Have you ever wanted to start your own cut flower farm? In this episode of GardenDC, we talk with Alex Mudry-Till of Quince Blossom Ridge all about cut flower farming. The plant profile is on Petrenia, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on Travels with Iris by Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by Alex Mudry-Till of Quince Blossom Ridge. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
We're going to be talking all about flower farming and what that involves and getting into all great things cut flower production. But before we get into that, Alex, our listeners and I would like to know, were you born with chlorophyll in your veins and a green thumb?
Well, I certainly did not think so, but my mom insists that I absolutely do because it skipped her generation, is what she always says. So my grandmother was a fantastic everything. She was an amazing gardener. She was a seamstress. She cooked, she baked, she canned. She was just, a wonder. But one of the things that everybody knew her for was her gardening skills. One of those core memories that I have is of being in her garden in upstate New York and picking red currants from this fence line that she used as her supports behind her little veggie patch, and lots of cactus dahlias and roses and lots of little sweet little idyllic memories. Did not touch gardening for probably another 30 years. Well, that's not entirely true. My parents had a lovely house with the house I grew up in had a more sort of turn of the century Asian inspired rock garden, which was very beautiful, but my mother begrudgingly maintained it, which means I begrudgingly maintained it. So that did not really foster my love of plants or flowers or anything. But I did love flowers. I did appreciate them. And I knew a lot because I got dragged to the nursery as a kid every weekend. And, the deer ate the azaleas, or the deer ate those roses down by the retaining wall, blah, 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 or there were punctuated moments of childhood that had gardening and plants and an appreciation of nature. I mean, I was not an outdoor kid at all. So if I was out there, I was gloved up, covered, protecting myself with, from ticks and mosquitoes and bees and all the things. I was like a bubble child, a little, but it really wasn't until later in my 30s when my husband and I bought our first house that I really started to learn more about flowers and gardening, and then finally had a garden of my own, and that kind of just that lit that fire, and we really have not looked back since then.
Yeah, I think that's a common story, Alex, that once you get your own growing space, your own land, or your own garden, or get your gardening for yourself.
Your own domain.
Yes. That gardening bug bites all of a sudden. I think it's the pheromones in the soil or something. Something is released, and you're and then they've captured you, the garden bugs, and then you're totally committed, head over heels. I hear that a lot, and that was my experience as well. As soon as you get your own place to grow in, you're just ravenous about gardening.
I also think too that I have found. So we found gardening, or we found our own path with gardening and plants and things like that through a few different ways. But one was watching Small Spaces, Big Dreams repeats with Monty Don.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think really like that was like that first moment for Dan and I to really say like, oh, look at these people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and like guidance from Monty, of course, but like for those who don't know the show, it's an older show. For those who don't know who Monty Don is, he is definitely one of my garden idols. He is one of the most well-known gardeners of Britain. He's very, very popular. He hosts something that blows my mind every week, a weekly gardening show that runs for most of the year, every year, and has been going for like 40 some odd years, called Gardener's World in the UK. But he used to have a show where it was kind of like like the HGTV sort of things where, it's like you pop in and an expert gives you some tips, and then you get this beautiful new back barbecue pit garden area. But there was a lot of personality, and there was a lot of just doing it yourself and having limitations, but like embracing those in a way that I felt made it feel less intimidating, for sure. I think that there's like, even the way that, you see gardening content exist in other countries versus how it is represented in America a lot of the time is just like the American ideal. You have your perfect green lawn, and you have your perfect garden with your perfect hydrangea hedge, and you do not have weeds. And if you have weeds or you have bugs, you spray everything, and everything has to get the right spray at the right time. And I think that there's like the moment that I saw the show and saw that there like could be some weird freedom. Like you could have a higgledy-piggledy moment, which just means that you have like a mishmash of plants in an area. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be pest-free. It just can exist and bring you joy. Was like that moment of like, oh, I might actually like this. This might actually be something greater than what I thought it was for, my entire life up to that point.
Excellent. Well, for those who know Monty Don well and have seen the show, usually he has many, many, many fans. And I think the makeover show that you described, that was very accessible for people, like you were saying. And I love that you were inspired by that. Can you describe maybe some of your first garden and transitioning to where you are now?
Yeah. So our first house was in Cheverly, Maryland, just over the DC border, and we absolutely loved it. It was a classic nightmare fixer-upper with lots of quote character, i.e. problems, including in the garden where you had like invasives and weird rock walls falling apart and poor drainage. But we loved it all. We found what we thought were treasures. Like I remember us walking around the property and being like, ooh, I know that plant. Ooh, that's going to be a peony. And ooh, we're going to get this. And I can't wait to see what happens next year when we have all these plants bloom, because we bought the house in summer, I think, or like late spring, summer. And so we kind of set about just like planting in a couple of things. I loved roses, so I got a couple of my first rose at the house. So I guess my first rose of my adult life was Lady of Shalott, because I'm
Good
such an
choice.
Anne of Green Gables nerd.
I was going to say a great choice for a
Yes.
starter rose too.
Yes.
You picked a good one. You didn't pick something like American Beauty Rose.
Yeah.
Like a heartbreaker. But yeah, good one.
So I just started like kind of, we had some garden beds. The house had been loved by the previous owners and lived in for like 50, 60 years. We actually found a piece of their wedding cake in a closet in the house, which at the time, and this is like where part of the jump happens of what I was doing to now, I was a wedding cake designer, and that's what I did for 14 years. So like when we found the house, we were like closing on it and found this little jar of like vintage wedding cake. And I was like, oh my God, this is our house. Like this has to be, this is a sign. And one of the other first things that we found in the garden were beautiful peonies and some quince, actually, some red quince shrubs in the backyard. And then so we just kept adding to it, and we put in 4 raised beds, and then I started adding in more bulbs every spring. And then the next year I added a lot more veggies and I started my own veggie starts indoors and had like one heat mat and one of those like tabletop small grow lights, which I laugh about now because now I have an entire grow room with like a crazy setup. But yeah, it just kept building and building. And then, I think that was around the time that the Dahlia craze started to really hit nationwide, where people were starting to like really get excited and understand and know about dahlias. And so I purchased a bunch of really expensive dahlias. And I feel like that was probably about 2018, 2019, when like I had what I thought was my dream potager in my front yard. I had roses interplanted with tomatillos and tomatoes and dahlias and garlic and herbs. And heading into COVID, I had no idea that it would be like such a nice conversation piece. And, the neighbors, as we were all taking our daily walks, our daily 6 feet apart isolated walks during COVID, they would look and be like, oh, look at that new flower. Look at that tomato. Oh, look at that thing. I didn't even see you plant that. And it became sort of this like way of connecting with the neighborhood and connecting with others. And, just it felt like it gave me so much at the time. And at the time, so like I mentioned, I was a wedding cake designer. And so I was co-owner of a bakery in DC called Buttercream Bake Shop. Which my partner and I, Tiffany, had started in 2015. Well, we had started it a couple years prior, and we were working out of her house, and we were building this business for years before the storefront was finally open, and we pushed and pushed and pushed and made amazing and beautiful wedding cakes, and we were in Martha Stewart, and we were in Brides and The Knot, and we did an incredible amount of work in a very short amount of time with limited resources and limited staff. And I'm still incredibly proud of all the work we did. But as you can kind of tell, we did a lot and I was really getting burnt out. My husband and I actually had met in culinary school. And so we kind of never, and that was back in 2008, and we kind of have never had a life where we were like on the same schedule. Like even when we met in culinary school, I was AM, he was PM. I was baking, he was savory. Then we went to work jobs, had opposite hours, lived in 2 different places, lived on 2 different continents for a little while. Like just never kind of synced up. And then compound that with, pushing to open a business and COVID and then everything changing. And I just hit a point where I was like, this, like this is my life and I'm heading towards 40 and I don't feel happy about any of the choices. And I don't feel like we're setting ourselves up for a future that is, fulfilling and grounding and bringing me joy. And the only thing that brings me joy right now is flowers and gardening. And at the same time, I love weddings and the creative people that I work with and the incredible things that we've put on in the last couple of years. But I'm so desperate to not let go of that aspect of my life, but I don't like it in this capacity right now. And so in between some sobbing and desperate, what do we do? Kind of moments, my husband and I figured out, like maybe the next step is like, let's create a venue. And that's kind of where QBR Quince Blossom Ridge started, is we were looking to create, and still are in the process of creating, a garden-focused outdoor wedding venue. Especially, it's definitely like partly a brainchild of COVID because we had so many weddings that were supposed to be in DC because we had multiple exclusives with DC area hotels. And when COVID hit, everything closed and everybody just went out to the country. And everybody was doing tented weddings. And I mean, the way that you can go from simple to building your own custom greenhouse and creating a restaurant in it. Like there's sky's the limit. Well, the money's the limit, but the sky's really the limit. But the creativity is there in any aspect, in any budget. And we just said, like, we love being outdoors. We love being in the country. We love entertaining. We love flowers and gardens and sharing special moments outdoors with our friends and making meals for people that we care about. And we were just like, okay, this we're going to do this. We're going to combine all these wild and crazy things together and go from there. And so in 2021, I started the Beginning Farmer Training Program at EcoCity Farms, which is actually a fantastic urban farm training program. And they have a farm incubator, and the program has really changed so much since I was in it during COVID. But the majority of it, during that time at least, was focused on just vegetable production.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great for me because I already loved cooking and vegetables and learning about that and growing those things for myself. But it gave me a better understanding of a market garden. And I think that for my perspective, I knew of people's gardens, and I didn't really know what farms were per se. Like, I knew it in the broad sense of, like, you pass a vast field of corn, but I didn't really know what a farm could be.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really great experience because they had 2 different campuses, 2 wildly different programs, and we learned about soil health and bugs and pests and trying to do this organically or naturally. And it was during that time that we found our property in Waldorf, Maryland, and we bought the property in 2021, and we've been working on it ever since. And we're still in the process of trying to create the venue component of things. That is still an ever evolving situation with some county red tape involved in it. In the meantime, and by the meantime, I mean the last 4 years, we focused primarily on growing and selling flowers to the public, for the public, yes. And that's what we do. So we sell at 3 different DC area farmers markets, and we have a bouquet subscription, sort of like a CSA, if you will, but we create seasonal bouquets, which is also sort of an answer to us having a really wonderful audience of people who, life's busy. You can't always get to the farmer's market on the weekend, or you aren't available to go to a midday farmer's market, or you're just out of town every weekend because you're traveling, or the kids' soccer team, or blah, blah, blah. So we try to create opportunities for people to get their dose of, beautiful local fresh flowers during the week. And then we also do workshops and events. And also, so we realized early on, because we started as gardeners, there are 2 main audiences that we have. And there's the gardener, who is an avid gardener or wants to be an avid gardener, who may have absolutely no idea, but is like, hey, you make it sound good. Maybe I should try this. Hesitantly, they say, but then they do it. And so we try to indulge both of those sides, the people who love flowers and just want a beautiful bouquet every week, and the people who are like, I want to grow something myself, whether that's an heirloom tomato or a special double variety tulip that only florists can normally get, or a beautiful seedling of something that, again, you're never going to find in a local nursery or a big box store. So we try to kind of cover all those bases by the different things that we do throughout the year.
And I love that you said there's a difference between a garden and a farm.
Yes.
There's just like this nebulous line sometimes. Sometimes we call ourselves an urban farm or urban gardener or urban farmer. And sometimes you think it's basic as, are you growing for yourself or are you
growing for profit?
For profit, yeah, production, or for giving it away. But
yes,
there's sometimes you think of it as a scale thing. How do you make that line definition between the 2?
I mean, for us, because we're paying a mortgage for a farm that we don't live on, which was also just sort of a thing that happened at the last minute. We had planned on building on our property when we bought it, and that fell through very quickly. So we were like, okay, I guess we got to go find a house. So we have a house 15 minutes from our farm. And so it makes it really clear, because we have a very clear mortgage for business property, which we got to pay, and we have bills to pay for that. But, I think the purpose, the intention, and the end product, or where the end product goes, definitely could be a component of it. I think the funny thing is, a lot of the time people say to us, oh, do you just grow these in your backyard? And I'm like, in theory, I suppose, yes, but no, we have a farm, which is always kind of a mixed answer to people. Like, sometimes people will be like, oh, but you're not a farm. And I'm like, no, we're a farm. And they're like, but you grow flowers. That's not a farm. And So sometimes that educational piece has to exist, because a lot of the times people will look at our beautiful bouquets in the spring filled with anemones and ranunculus and tulips and peonies and roses, and they'll say, look at those wildflowers. and, and, and I will sweetly smile and say, these are actually cultivated flowers from our farm, which is a little bit different. Not to say that we don't use wildflowers or native plants in some of our arrangements and things, but what we do is not just backyard gardening. And I say that with hesitancy because I have so much respect for backyard gardeners, because there's so many levels to that too. Like, again, just to throw it back to Monty and Gardener's World, if you watch Gardener's World, you see that people can have the most incredible balcony gardens or indoor houseplant gardens or lush tropical spaces filled with tree ferns that would make my husband like die with envy, because he loves a tree fern. He desperately wants a tree fern. You know, like there's so many different things. So I guess, you know, we identify as a farm. We treat it as a farm. When it comes to flowers, I think the educational piece in that is it's very broad. There's a lot of things that actually have to get covered, and that's kind of important as it's our responsibility as the business owners and the people selling the flowers to communicate like why we do this, what we're doing, why it's not just that I went to my backyard and in the middle of the day and I grabbed a handful of things and I jammed them in a bucket and I walked to the farmer's market. Like, there is so much education that happens. There's so much technique. And just the way a vegetable farmer will not harvest a green at the wrong time of day, there is that times 20,000 on flowers and greenery and foliage and woodies and all of that. So it's a lot, and all of these factors can apply to a backyard gardener, a person who has a farmette. There is nothing wrong with that, and I'm not saying anything against that. I think the farm definition really does come to like where that end product goes to and what the expectation is of that end product. And I think that like the expectation part of it is a key component of where we are at in our journey of the farm, is that, you know, we are literally selling completely different flowers than the ones you'll find in a grocery store. And yes, you may see me selling a tulip, and you may see a tulip at your Trader Joe's. They 99.9 times out of 100 will not be the same tulip, because they're selling a commodity product, whereas I am selling a specialty unique product that I am paying a premium to source, that I'm also getting a certain bulb size. So it's going to be the biggest flower and the healthiest flower. And there's so much to this very nuanced conversation that happens when you get a flower farmer talking about the difference between a grocery store flower or a small farm grown flower. And beyond, like I said, the product itself being different, it's the expectation of it as well. Our flowers are definitely more expensive than some things that you'll find in a grocery store. But part of that has to do that we are not an army of people with giant subsidies and massive, like anything that you manufacture in a larger scale, it will eventually become cheaper in theory, the more that you produce of it. But we're not producing millions of stems a day like some of these larger conventional farms are. And when I'm saying conventional farms, I'm talking about the fact that about the most recent statistic was about 80% of the flowers that most people are buying in your grocery store that are purchased, or from a florist as well. It's not just grocery stores. I'm not like just beating down on grocery stores. The majority of the flowers purchased in the United States, over 80%, are imported. And there are a lot of factors to that, of course. And that could be a whole other podcast all on its own. But for us, we value our earth, like our property. We value the soil. We do not till. We're like very low till. We don't actually till with a tractor, but we do fork things. We're not like 100% no till. So we really focus on trying to improve the soil with organic matter, whether it's compost or leaves or letting roots break down into the ground. And that helps with drainage, which we all know. We're all in the DC well, a lot of us are in the DC metro area, which means we have clay soil that doesn't drain very well. And one of the best ways that you can combat that is adding organic matter. We also don't spray any chemicals or pesticides or fungicides on our property at all, which is 1,000% different from the majority of the flowers that people are buying from a florist or a grocery store. And it's not to say that they are bad. They are a different thing. They are literally a product that was bred so that it could be picked at a stage, sprayed a whole bunch with all different things to make sure it arrives over multiple international borders, so it is perfect and unwrapped and at a stage that it is perfect to purchase from a store or to be sent to a florist. And to be able to cross over international borders, and in the situation of the US, following USDA standards, there needs to be no disease concern, no pests. Otherwise, all of that stuff gets burnt up before it even gets to the country. So like I said, we can get like mired in this and I could go on forever, which I'm not going to. But all of this is to say is that what I grow, you're not going to find in a store 9 times out of 10. Whether it is the specialty, very unique tulips that we force for Valentine's Day, so that we have a locally grown, semi-seasonally grown flower available for our audience at Valentine's Day, or the really beautiful specialty peonies and ranunculus that we're growing in spring, or even our roses, which is how Kathy and I met through the Potomac Rose Society, and she knows that I have quite a number of roses. And roses are one of our passions at the farm, but the roses that we grow and sell are nothing like you will find in the grocery store. And there's also a certain level of expectation for vase life when it comes to the things that people are buying in the grocery store. And part of that ends up being that price point issue. And again, it's so complicated to try to explain that, flowers are not meant to last forever. As we know, for those of us who are gardeners, like, it is meant to be seasonal and fleeting and ephemeral. And that's part of the beauty and the joy of it. And so we grow things that we may only have for 2 weeks out of the year. Like, so many of us love a lilac. You only see them a handful of weeks out of the year for a reason. They grow that one time and that's it. Or like, we grow mock orange or deutzia, beautiful scented shrubs that, like, during spring, around Mother's Day, wedding season, like, those are the moments where you get this opportunity to have this thing that you cannot ship, that you cannot be mass producing and sending out to your floral studios, that only your local grower is going to have. And I think that those moments are special. And that is what we try to cultivate with the flowers we produce. And that's the experience that we want to cultivate for our customers. Is we call out all of our customers flower friends. And I really mean that genuinely, like, not in just like the hokiest way possible, because it sounds very hokey. We mean that because we get jazzed about this. We love this so much. And we want our customers to be excited about it too. We want our customers to be like, oh man, it's almost fall. Dahlias are coming. I've already had multiple customers every week for the last 3 weeks being like, hey, when are dahlias coming? When are we going to get our dahlias? Because they know, because that's one of those great things you really cannot get shipped. People know it is local season only for dahlias. And those stars of the fall that are kind of a nightmare to grow sometimes, but they're worth it because they're so beautiful and unique, and you just can't ship them and you can't recreate them in a mass production the way that, and experience them in that same way. And so we try to create that special moment, just like when we were in restaurants, just like when we were baking and creating, that special wedding cake or that unique birthday cake. Like, we want to just translate that momentary connection and experience with our customers.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
I'm glad you brought up some of the things about local sourcing of flowers and the international trade that's not so well known. Those of us who have read Amy Stewart's Flower Confidential book, which I highly recommend.
Yes.
Anybody who has purchased flowers or used flowers ever, her tracing of the American floral industry's ups and downs, and that, the fact that we were sourcing, the great majority of our flowers from overseas, and now we have a strong slow flower movement. I kind of credit her book with that resurgence of slow flowers and local farm sourcing, and that people are specifically, and I'm talking brides and other occasions, are saying to their florist, their floral designers, we want local flowers. That people are even knowing to ask that, because who would have thought to even ask that 10 years ago?
Yes. Well, and that's that education component to it. And that's our responsibility out there. And it's like, for better or worse, social media has made the world of gardening and flowers and local flowers explode to the world audience in a way that didn't exist before. And I mean, I'm great. There's lots of things about social media, but I am grateful for it because I learned and saw so much from what was out there, from the Slow Flowers movement and Deborah Prinzing. And in Maryland, we are so fortunate that we have a really robust Maryland and Virginia flower farming community that we all, for the most part, know each other, really support each other. I'm actually the vice president of the Maryland Cut Flower Growers Association. So a little shout out to anybody who is looking to become a flower farmer or is a flower farmer in Maryland and hasn't already joined us. It is really a wonderful opportunity for you to learn from so many different generations of flower farmers who have been doing it in so many different capacities, whether you're selling wholesale directly to event florists or directly volume growing for boutique grocery shops, or people like us who are selling CSA subscriptions and at farmers markets. It's been a great opportunity because we have so much education here and such a wonderful, welcoming community of other flower farmers who I know I've learned so much from, and I hope that I can only share more of that with them. But I have so much gratitude to those earlier generations of flower farmers who came before us, who also people like Dave Dowling, who used to be a flower farmer in Maryland and then went on to sell and is to sell flowers, flower starts and seeds and products through some larger companies, and now is he's just a complete expert on everything, and he just goes around the country being his amazing expert self. But he started in Maryland. He was one of the first flower farmers at the DuPont Circle Flower Farmers Market.
Mm-hmm.
and Ellen Frost in Baltimore with Local Color Flowers. Like, we have a really great community of people who are trying to support the farming movement and the local flower movement here. I'm grateful for the education they put forward to the audience before us, and I, I was passed that torch and I grabbed it, and I'll keep going with it for as long as I can.
Yeah, I was just reminiscing about Dave and buying flowers from him way back in the day at the DuPont Circle.
Oh, that's so
Farmers
funny.
Market. And I was like, who is this guy? And what are these flowers in the wintertime? I remember buying from him, and I was like, they are in December. You should not have these. So I think he was growing undercover.
Yeah.
Meaning like a hoop house type growing situation. So I was always amazed and talking to him back then. But yeah, it's great to hear. And I see his name popping up, giving talks for cut flower growers and flower farmers. And it's great to see him still active out there. And so I wanted to turn the conversation to some flower farm type of questions that our listeners might be interested in learning. And that would be, what is your most difficult flower to grow that is in demand, and what's your easiest?
So I did already hit on it.
Mm-hmm.
I hit on both of them for the difficult. I would say roses and dahlias.
Mm-hmm.
I love roses, and I still remain passionate about them, but we have kind of changed our journey a little bit. Originally, we were selling mostly directly wholesale to event florists, and keeping up with that demand and wedding season and when our flowers flowered, and then dealing with pest pressure because we do not spray, has really like sort of evolved our understanding and flower choices. And again, because they're a perennial, you really don't know how good they are or bad they are for a couple of years. So I love them, and we still grow them, and we still feature them when they are at their best. But they are tricky in this area. Black spot, thrips, just any fungal diseases, rose rosette, of course. And then dahlias are just, they take a lot of work throughout the season. For us as flower farmers, we purchase them either as a clump or a single tuber, and then we baby it through the winter. And then in spring, we plant it, and then we baby that area for the next 5 to 6 months, and we deal with too much rain, not enough rain, hilling up the plants, weeding, pest pressure, Japanese beetle season, over and over and over. And every year we adapt our plan for what we're going to do, and every year we changed again the next year. But we grow a lot of dahlias, and I love them, and I won't stop growing them. They probably are not the most profitable because of the amount of time and labor that goes into keeping them alive in the season, and then digging them out, and then washing them and cleaning them and dividing them and storing them over the winter. But I will never stop growing them, and people love them so much. And they are definitely their own podcast of all the good, the bad, the science of them, all of it. It's a completely fascinating plant. So I will never stop growing them, even though they are divas.
Mm-hmm. And then what would be your easiest?
Celosia or celosia, whatever you want. I grow all the varieties. It self-seeds like crazy. I love it. It's so unique. It looks like velvet. Kids love touching it, and it doesn't destroy it, unlike dahlias.
Yes.
I say that because people love looking at a beautiful dinner plate dahlia at the farmer's market and then touching the outer petals, which makes me cry inside a little bit. But celosia, if you want to grow something that's unique and cool, and maybe you can dry it, and maybe you can have it in different arrangements, and you can share it with people from one plant for the rest of your life, celosia is one of those plants.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And the irresistible.
Yes. And then the pollinators. You have the best little views of sleepy bees at the end of the summer into fall, and they're just bringing in all of the wasps. And I'm allergic to all those things, but I know I need them to balance out and deal with the bad bugs. So if I grow a lot of celosia and maybe I just don't harvest a part because the bees and things are on it, then that's what I do.
And then what flower do you wish people would buy that they ignore?
That I wish they would ignore. Well, none of them, because they're my children. I can't say that. I guess it's not that I think that they would ignore. I think that, so we grow a lot of different tulips, whether it's the forced tulips for Valentine's Day that we do in the early winter that we force indoors in our grow room. And then there's the field grown tulips. And I think that people are completely obsessed with certain varieties and they will only buy those varieties, but there's so many unique ones out there that I just wish people would give them a try.
Mm-hmm.
And we grow them and they're, year in, year out, you never know what the trend will be, that everybody absolutely obsessed with this one type of tulip. And it seems so silly, but I guess that they don't, well, okay, it's a complicated answer because they don't necessarily ignore it, or I guess they don't ignore it. They love it and then they suddenly ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Or they say, oh, I can just get that at the grocery store. And I'm like, well, you definitely can't. You're not getting a peony style tulip at the grocery store.
No.
For sure.
Yeah, I think you're right about the trends because we used to sell bulbs every year in the fall for the Tacoma Horticultural Club as our annual fundraiser. We'd order, 1 year you couldn't have enough tall red single tulips.
Yes.
Just sell out. And then the next year we'd order a bunch because people were asking for it. And then we would be stuck with 500 red single tulips.
Yes.
Because you're like,
yes.
What is going on?
And you also have to order those things so far in advance.
Mm-hmm. And that does bring up pre-planning and when you start your planning for that next season.
Yes, always. ABP is my motto, always be planning. I have so many spreadsheets. I am a planner by nature, so this is good for me. This scratches the itch, which I love, but it is wild how far in advance sometimes we have to plan for things. And part of that goes back to the gardening aspect. We grow a kind of diverse, it's pretty normal for flower farmers to grow a mix of things, but we grow both annuals and perennials. We grow woodies and shrubs. We grow tubers and corms and all the things. And so that means you might get the best of something in 2 or 3 years, or it might not get really established and at a stage that you can cut it for 5 years, but you make that investment in it if it's, like a tree or something like that. And so we have to make some of those plans very far in advance, and then part of that goes into figuring out where we're going to lay things out. But for the year to year, because again, that's big picture planning, that's planning an alley of magnolias, that's been in our landscape plan for the future plan, but you gotta make sure you get the right cultivar. All the things that are interplanted will have the same habit and like the same things. For our normal year to year, it's at least, I would say, 14 months plus in advance of planning. So when I started some spring seedlings in midsummer because they were biennials. I had to order my tulips that I won't plant until this fall back in February before any of my ground tulips had even started flowering yet. So I didn't even know if the varieties I bought were good or not. So a lot of that has to be several months, if not a year in advance to source certain materials. That's the big thing. If you're sourcing specialty bulbs, plants, corms, tubers, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then the rest, annual stuff, usually a full year at least is my comfort zone, because so much of it is you plan a thing 6 months in advance and then you hope that it grows. So I might start a seedling now and plant it out in October and pray that it starts flowering in April like when I planned it to. And, sometimes with that, it doesn't work out. So this year we had doubled down on snapdragons because we had a wonderful year the 2 years before. And we were also doing a trial of several snapdragon varieties for the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. And we got double hit in a way that my extension agent said that he had never, ever seen before of thrips and a certain kind of shield stink bug that decimated all of them. I had maybe 20 stems that I harvested from probably over 1,000 plants.
Wow.
And that's months and months of growing that and planning and sourcing the seed and starting the seedling. So the good and bad of that is the bad is obvious. We didn't have snapdragons, but the good of that is you have to learn how to adapt. So, you don't depend on only one thing. You try to create a diverse crop plan so that you have something else to fall back on. A lot of the time we fall back on things that are meadow plants or shrubs or natives that we can use. But the plan is your backbone, but you have to be very flexible throughout the year. You're constantly pivoting. You're pivoting like every single week. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, then flower farming is not for you. Farming in general is probably not for you.
I was going to say, or any farming, because you always have to have a plan B, C, D, because if this crop fails or this happens, and that's another good point for difference between flower farming and a cut flower garden. So if all my celosia, I don't know, something happens to the seed and they don't come up this year, so what? But that's a big difference for you as a flower farmer if all your celosia didn't come up.
Yeah, I mean, like with the Snapdragon example, those were about half of that was meant to go to Mother's Day, because we have a cooler at the farm and we have a cooler at the house, and that's how we store a lot of our flowers. And certain things like Snapdragons can store for a week or two in the cooler and have and store it like perfect condition. And so I had planned in my crop plan that I was going to have, 500, 600 stems of this to add to our Mother's Day bouquets. And I didn't have them. And I didn't have anything else to put in there in place of that spike style flower. So I had to figure out something else.
And you said, obviously you're in the cut flower association with other cut flower farmers. Do you often source from each other when you have a hole like that in your harvest?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Because we don't spray, and that is part of what we tell our customers and advise our customers. That does make it a little bit more complicated because there are more conventional farms around us that grow flowers that we could potentially source from. And if that does happen that we have to, we'll disclose that to our customers. But generally, we try to stick within the other flower farmers that are in our region, especially since we're trying to, we're just trying to foster more love for local flowers. And
Well, let's talk about a wish list. And that would be, if you could talk directly to the plant breeders, what would you like them to create? And so I was thinking my cut flower wish list would include a cosmos that doesn't shatter after a couple days in the vase.
I would say so. Everybody's very obsessed with the new fancy zinnias right now, and I'm here for it because there are some really beautiful new varieties out there. What I have noticed in our hot, humid fungal wonderland that is the DMV, that some of the newer fancier zinnias are way more prone to fungal problems. So it would be great if we got these really cool, unique varieties that had both better vase life and better resistance to these fungal things, because those fungal things then will affect the vase life. A lot of these problems, they start to manifest on the leaves, and then before you know it, you harvested a flower and it looked in perfect condition. You did the wiggle test to make sure it was good, and you brought it home and you see it browned out within a day. And that's a fungal condition. So that would be a thing, because they're so easy to grow. They are generally happy in our area, except for when the fungal stuff starts to come through. But honestly, I think we didn't talk nearly as much as I probably would have liked to about how much we do end up using perennials and woodies in our mixes. And I tell this to the plant breeders whenever I get an opportunity to meet them, is I would love them to really think about cut flowers when these breeding programs happen, because I think a lot of the time it goes the way of focusing on something that is great for your average low maintenance, low care lawn that you can buy in a big box store kind of plant, and it might have a bonus as being a good cut. And that's where it gets advertised as good for cutting. But for our purposes, it's not always good for cutting, or it's not, you're only, it might be good for cutting, but you might only get 2 flowers from it. So I do think that, a lot of flower farmers invest in woodies and shrubs, and sometimes we invest in them just because they're good for filler. But I think that there's so many beautiful, unique varieties out there of things that if we could get more of them, in other seasons, or have them be hardier, or have them have more flowers and more of a productive plant, I would see more flower farmers invest in buying those plants.
Yeah, I see it when I talk to plant breeders about hydrangeas. They definitely
Yes.
are very well aware
Yes.
of the flower farmer in hydrangea breeding. And
Mhm.
there's different strains and lines being developed versus a garden hydrangea versus what they're growing for the cut flower farmers. Those are two totally different plants that they're
Yeah.
growing. I'm not seeing it, as you say, so much in the perennials. Maybe some for rudbeckias. I've had them
Yeah.
tell me that these are good for cut flower farmers. These specific rudbeckias, they're perennials, but they sometimes act like annuals, of course.
Yeah.
And some cone flowers, sometimes in the echinacea, but
Mhm.
not much outside of that.
And those are like very specific looks and very specific vase life, and that all of those factors together. Like a perfect example, honestly, going back to lilacs, if I could see an ever blooming lilac that had a better quality flower like the ones that you only get in spring, I would buy so many of those plants. If I could get an ever blooming that would at least, and I wouldn't need it all summer, I could go for just like a full month, maybe a little bit longer. That would be incredible, because that would be literally twice the amount of time that most of us get from a lilac plant. And if I could have it for a couple more weeks, that would be worth buying an entirely new series of plants to me.
Well, I do know personally that they are working on the re-blooming lilacs to have some of those coming through. But yeah, bigger, fuller,
yes, bigger, fuller.
and
I mean, I like the little
scent.
ones. The little ones are nice for landscaping. They're nice to get that beautiful lilac scent through your open window in the evening. But us cut flower people, we want more. We want more.
And maybe we should end it there with the "we want more."
Yes, we want more, and we hope you want more.
Exactly. So how can our listeners contact you, Alex, or get in contact with Quince Blossom Ridge?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we are in person, myself and or Dan, are at our 3 farmers markets that we do each week. So we're at City Center Farmers Market in DC on Tuesdays. We're at the Brookland Arts Walk Farmers Market on Saturdays, and Gateway Farmers Market in Brentwood, Maryland on Saturdays as well. If you are a newsletter person, so we have 2 main ways to reach us. I would say either social media or newsletter/email. I write the newsletter each week from the very dining room table I am currently recording this podcast at. And it's like a little snippet of our like weird, wonky little flower farming life. If you'd like to subscribe to that, you can find the link from our website, which is quinceblosomridge.com. Otherwise, we are on all the socials. I'm most active under the Quince Blossom Ridge Instagram. And so you can DM me. We post a good amount of content, lots of beautiful flower pictures, obviously. And there's lots of links on there for flower tips and events and workshops that we do. And like, that's kind of where we're going into this part of the season, is lots of flower production, but also lots of like fun botanical crafting workshops and edible flower workshops. And then as we get into the, autumn and winter, we get into wreath workshops and that sort of stuff. All of that gets advertised on our Instagram. We have a link tree from our Instagram account that has everything there. Like I said, we really try to cater to both the person who really loves a bouquet of flowers and the person who maybe wants to grow that bouquet in their backyard. And so we will be having our fall offerings for your spring garden very shortly, both at markets and on our online store, which will include bulbs and like some of those very special, really, really cool and unique tulip bulbs, alliums, bare root peonies. We get really incredibly high quality bare root peonies that we sell every fall. And then we also have some more unique kinds of perennial plants that we grew from seed ourselves that we'll have as seedlings available for purchase.
Awesome. Did you want to add anything else, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we found so much connection with nature and with gardens, and then, bringing that love and connection to our markets and to our newsletter and to our social media. And so we just really hope that we can keep spreading that feeling of connection that we feel, and excitement about flowers. And hopefully that, every little opportunity we have to talk to the people out there to make more flower friends is better for all of us, for both connection and for, the planet that we're trying to save.
So true and well said. And I should put a plug in, Alex, for the DC State Fair.
Yes.
That is September 6th. If you're listening to this in real time, September 6th, 2025. And if you're in the greater Washington, D.C. region and can come to the DC State Fair, Alex and I are going to be judging the cut flower arranging competition. And I think that's around 2 p.m.-ish in the afternoon.
Yes, I'm very excited.
And that is literally live. The contestants are given a bouquet and a jar, and they are to do the arrangements in front of us. I mean, we're not going to stand there and be staring at them, but we will judge the results. And it'll be very cool. And then they get to take home their beautiful arrangement that they made there, too. So I think that's a prize in itself. Whether you win a ribbon or not, you get to have fun playing with flowers.
Not to mention, there's a DC State Fair. I feel like people don't talk about it and people don't know that it exists. And there's so many fun categories. It's just like your standard state fair, except there's probably fewer cows, is my guess. Yes. That would be my guess.
Definitely for that. All right. Well, any final thoughts, Alex, before we let you go on flower farming?
For anybody who has considered it, and thought like, wow, that's my dream. And, because a lot of people definitely probably look at us and are like, well, they jumped into it. One of those crazy COVID ideas, those don't always work out. Well, I'm very stubborn. So I'm going to make it work, but that's not always the healthiest way to go, to be fair. For those who are interested in it, I highly recommend looking into it and probably just not putting as much pressure on yourself to make it like a beautifully amazing, successful business with everything branded and everything perfect and all the time. There's a lot of killing plants. So much killing of plants. So much harvesting at the wrong stage. You just have to be a lot more comfortable with learning things and making mistakes and knowing that you can learn from every one of those mistakes. And if that does not feel like a comfortable space to live in, don't do farming. Enjoy your back garden. Let your celosia go to seed. Let the tomatoes go to seed and have some accidental volunteers next year. Just, let those things be and enjoy that moment for yourself, and don't make it into something it doesn't need to be.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alex.
Of course. Thank you.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Petronia plant profile. Petronia scabiosifolia is a perennial flower with bright citrus yellow flowers that looks great in a mixed border. The basal foliage resembles scabiosa, hence its Latin name. These lower leaves turn reddish in the autumn as a bonus. It's native to Eastern Asia and is hardy to USDA zones 5 to 8. Petronia is also known as Eastern Valerian or golden lace. It requires a full sun location with well-draining soils. It blooms throughout the summer and grows to about 3 to 6 feet high. It's best to plant it closely with other plants that can support it, or you will need to stake it. You can propagate it from seed or divide it in the springtime. Do not deadhead it the first year, but then do so in subsequent years if you do not wish it to self-sow. Petronia attracts pollinators, including beneficial bees. It's generally considered to be deer and rabbit resistant. Petronia, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm enjoying the blooms on my echinacea, which are kind of in their second round after I gave them their Chelsea chop earlier this season. Over at the community garden plot, I'm enjoying making chocolate zucchini bread from our zucchini harvest and pesto from our basil harvest. I'm also collecting the seeds from my dill plants. In the gardening tips that we shared on social media this week, we talked all about composting, and one of our tips was to rake and shred leaves for composting and mulching in your garden, except for the leaves and foliage from butternut, tree of heaven, and black walnut trees, as they can inhibit some plant growth with the chemicals that those leaves release into your compost pile. In local gardening events, if you're in the greater Washington, D.C. area, you might want to attend Jazz in the Gardens, September 3rd and September 17th at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens in Washington, D.C. That's where the Marshall Keys Sextet will be playing a tribute to composer Quincy Jones on September 3rd and Afro-Caribbean inspired jazz on September 17th. That'll be on Hillwood's lawn. Bring a picnic blanket and lawn chairs, and the cost is $30. You can register at the Hillwood website. And then looking ahead on Saturday, November 22nd, 2025, I will be presenting a program at Green Spring Gardens in Alexandria, Virginia on seasonal holiday plants, and that will include a bulb forcing demo, and that's at 1 p.m. on that date. You can register for the class through fairfaxcounty.gov parks system or by calling Green Spring Gardens. I'm going to share tips on nurturing your holiday favorite plants and also introducing a few unique plant varieties that make thoughtful gifts and charming additions to your home decor. Then we're going to talk all about the basics of bulb forcing and pot some up for you to try out yourself. Happy gardening!
This is The Last Word by Christy Page with Green Prints with Travels with Iris, a story by Pat Stone. The other week, I helped my sister move from Paris, Virginia to Atlanta, Georgia, from a rural farm to a small white house in the city. Not just any urban house, the one my parents lived in, the one that has stood empty since they died. My job was to drive a load of Nancy's things down and put them in Mom and Dad's old dining room. Nancy and her boyfriend would follow a few days later with the rest of the stuff. A simple enough task. Even a little brother could handle it. I rented a monster-sized red Ford pickup and did my share of packing, tables, chairs, boxes, all of which got heaped and tarped in the back of the truck. Of course, Nancy didn't want to let an inch of front seat room go to waste either, so she filled the cab with Christmas wreaths, a little donkey cart planter, and other less sturdy odds and ends. That's how I met Iris. She went in last, in a large blue and white porcelain pot, a bearded blue and yellow beauty that was tall, graceful, and thin. Not one of the gaudy kinds that looked like paint spills and mail-order catalogs, florid dance hall queens in garish petticoats. This one was different, strong yet delicate, her 3 petals up, 3 petals down, pattern both revealing and concealing an injured beauty. Yet as the ride went on, Iris's loveliness was not what truly impressed me. The road is our civilization's prayer closet. It's where our restless, rootless race finally finds a chance to still itself, to be alone with thoughts and feelings. For miles and miles and miles, and for 10 hours, I was in that pickup closet, driving back to the home where Dad and then Mom died. But I wasn't depressed or lonely. I couldn't be. My companion was silent, but she was there. Her presence and peace pervaded the cab like the scent of a flower, and some of it seeped into me. I needed it. After I unloaded Nance's stuff, I spent some time roaming through the old home place. I found some pictures and relived some memories, most warm, some sad, one too tender to share. Then I gave Iris a deep soaking, said goodbye to her and the past, and headed home. Nancy called to thank me a few days later, but I thanked her instead for giving me, at 65 miles an hour in a rented Ford truck, an experience I'd never had in my own garden. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at greenprints.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you liked this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC podcast episode 54, Flower Farming with Lisa Mason Ziegler, GardenDC episode 104, Dahlias, and GardenDC episode 19, Floral Design with Holly Heider Chapple. By the way, you can become a listener, supporter, or subscriber. Find that link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to washingtongardener.com or washingtongardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media on Twitter or X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too.